Right then, ladies and gentlemen, it's time for the first video in which I look over the individual Dark Angels units and discuss the changes that have taken place between the two codexes. So first up we have a personal favourite of mine, the Deathwing Knights. Arguably the coolest models in the game, definitely the coolest models in the Dark Angels range as far as I'm concerned. I know a lot of the other Space Marine chapters are envious of the deliciousness of these models. Problems that they had before, they were kind of a one-hit wonder. Their weapons weren't really getting the job done, apart from once per game when they were just mega awesome. So really you could get one really good combat out of them and the rest of the time they were just mediocre. So we'll see what they've done to remedy that and whether some of the other changes that have been made affect them positively or negatively. So first things first, the cost of a unit is exactly the same. However, adding additional knights is 1 point cheaper than it used to be now, which is interesting. However, the relic that you can put with them has gone up in points, and it seems to do pretty much the same thing. So I think overall it'll even out if you want to have a larger unit of them. If you just want a small unit, then they will actually be more expensive if you want the relic in there. One thing that's noticeable is that some of the rules in this book have changed name, or been merged with other rules and then given one kind of overarching name that covers several different rules, which isn't confusing at all. What it boils down to is that they still have most of the old rules they have. They still have the likes of Precision, Strike, Hammer of Wrath and so on. They still have their +1 toughness when touching two other models, which I was never really a huge fan of. Call me crazy here, but I would say the time these guys are most vulnerable is when they deep strike onto the battlefield. And the thing that's going to be putting them under threat are probably large AP2 blast weapons. And most of those have a sufficiently high strength so that boosting their toughness from 4 to 5 is not going to offset the negative of them all being bunched together perfectly for a template, but maybe that's just me. If you group them together well enough in close combat, then it can be very useful. But I don't think they're as under threat in close combat as they are from the vast array of AP2 shooting that's around there nowadays. A few things that have definitely changed: their weaponry. The Flail of the Unforgiven, which is on the Deathwing Knight Master, now has Fleshbane, so I can see that coming in handy if you're against some kind of large creature that has a high toughness. Since against anything kind of man-sized, it wouldn't really matter because you're already sufficiently high strength to get the job done anyway. So against big monsters it'll be handy. And the biggest change, I would say, the Mace of Absolution, which is the weapon that the rest of the knights have. This used to be good against Chaos Space Marines. It used to be AP4 and then boosted to AP3 against Chaos. Now it's AP3 against everybody. So where they used to struggle before against other Space Marines, only being AP4, they're now AP3, and they still have the +2 on the strength. So that's a very, very welcome change, and they haven't got more expensive for it. I think it was just GW bringing them in line with where they should have been in the first place, really. They are actually very tasty in close combat now. The Smite attack has changed quite a bit. What's the same is that it still doubles your strength and puts you down to AP2, which is very, very tasty, but now, instead of just being a once per game ability with your full number of attacks, it now drops you down to 1 attack, but you can do it every turn if you want to, which makes them a lot more versatile, I would say, and stops them being such a one-hit wonder. Now any time where you really need that AP2 or an exceptionally high strength, you're going up against other Terminators or a vehicle or something, you can do that multiple times during the game now without worrying about blowing the Smite attack in the wrong one. Another change to them, this change for all the Deathwing really, is that they can no longer deep strike in turn 1. Those are all the changes to the rules, so I'm going to talk about how this will affect them tactically now. So they can't come down in turn 1 anymore, and they don't have any guns. So you're not going to have as much opportunity to get them into multiple combats anymore because they're spending less time on the battlefield. However, at the same time, their ability to perform in multiple combats has been boosted. This seems to be a theme in the new Dark Angels Codex. It seems to be a lot of the special rules are specific to situations that you aren't going to find yourself in very often. That's where you're getting a lot of your boosts. So if you can find a way to get these guys into multiple combats, then you're going to be doing very well. It's just going to be harder to do it now. What I'm thinking of doing though is just sticking them in a Land Raider, because dropping them down, it gets them killed, they're expensive, and they don't have any guns, so people can just run away from them. They'll see where they land and they'll just go in the opposite direction, and they're not really fast enough to chase people down. So having them assault out of a Land Raider seems like a very, very good idea now, especially since they can no longer turn 1 deep strike. You might find it easier to reposition them throughout the game as well then, and get them into multiple worthwhile combats. The way I would position them previously, I would pretty much pick one target that I wanted utterly obliterating in the enemy army, and I would just deep strike them down close to that, and then trust in them that they were going to do their job at some point during the game. They've got 5 turns to run around and try and kill it, which they were probably going to do because of the Smite Tech, unless they all got killed by shooting, which is a distinct possibility. But now, I would be hesitant to position them in the same way. I would be more likely to try and place them somewhere where I know they can not only get into one combat, but also then move on onto other units afterwards, because they're still going to remain just as effective. The fact that they're AP3 as standard means that they're not going to get held up by power armor anymore, which was a problem previously. You would have to use your Smite attack on a regular enemy tactical squad, really, which is not where you want to be using it at all. It's nice that you're not having to worry so much about power armor now. And then, even if you've already used your Smite, you've still got it just sitting there in your back pocket for whenever you need it, depending on the enemy that's coming at you. So to sum up, instead of them being incredibly awesome in one combat and then mediocre the rest of the time, now they're just good all the time, which is what I want. Their specific rules have got a bit of a boost. The Deathwing rules have had a bit of a downgrade, so it makes sense that they cost around the same. But they're, like I was saying, I think their power level throughout the game has kind of been evened out instead of being one big peak and then a slump. I think they're still going to find a place in my army lists. I'm going to try and get a couple more of them painted, run them around with a character of some kind perhaps, in a Land Raider, plonk them straight into the enemy lines, try and get multiple combats in. I think they're going to be pretty beastly. Well, anyone want me to find out? That's testing them out on the table. So keep your eyes peeled, and I'll be back with a video on another unit pretty soon. Ta-ta for now.